Hi, everybody. I'd like to chat a little bit about After the Ice, a global human history, 20,000 to 5,000 BC by Steven Mithen. I just finished this a few days ago, and I've been kind of busy because I have a friend visiting from out of state, but I wanted to go ahead and do a quick chat on this before, while it was still a refresher in my mind before, it started to get a little stale. So, yeah, After the Ice, this was published originally back in 2003, I think, in Great Britain, and then this particular edition was published in the U.S. By Harvard University Press, and this was published in 2006, this edition that I have. I bought this book years ago, I think about 2008. That I've had this book and I have never read it. So it's been on my shelf, and I've moved multiple times around and, culled through books, but I've always kept this one because it's something that I always meant to read. And so when I was putting together my 2017 must-read TBR, I thought, okay, this is going to be my year to get After the Ice read. And you can see it's kind of hefty. It's actually, there's a lot of endnotes in the back. This is nonfiction, but there's still 511, pages of text. So it's a lot of material in here. And what this is about is basically, a narrative about right after the Ice Age was ending. 20,000 BC is, I guess, sort of a cutoff point where it was the last maximum of the glaciation that occurred in the world. And so 20,000 BC takes us from that period all the way to 5,000 BC. And 5,000 BC is where we start getting writing and, towns and civilization kind of as we know it started to develop around that time. So he covers this period of time, this stretch of time between the end of the last Ice Age, although it didn't just end abruptly. It took a while and quite a bit of back and forth, and really chaotic climate change there for a while before the climate stabilized again. And he tells the story of individual groups of humans all around the world, and there's different sections. The book starts out in Western Asia. And then it covers also Western Asia, Europe, the Americas, both North and South, Greater Australia and East Asia, South Asia, like India and Iraq, and then Africa. So through this, throughout all of these sort of sections of the book, the entire world gets covered. And this was really interesting to me because I think most of the time, when I hear about the Ice Age, just in popular culture, it's sort of the European-focused aspect of the Ice Age. And while I did learn in this book that Europe and Western Asia really had some of the most chaotic climate change associated with the Ice Age, along with North America. But, the Ice Age, ultimately the climate change affected really the entire world, both north and south, both the northern and the southern hemispheres. So just a few things that I took away from the different regions. Western Asia is this region where, like Jericho, really one of the first towns as we know it, because really this story is mainly about hunters and gatherers, meaning nomadic. A time in human history when we were nomads. We had only stone tools, and a band of humans could really only stay in one place a really relatively short amount of time because they were on a constant search for food. So Western Asia, though, was a place where Jericho, which is in current Jordan, and around the Sea of Galilee, like in Israel, where and also I think in Western Syria as well, where people, because of the natural grains that grew there, which were like wheat and barley and lentils, beans, they were. They sort of settled in to farm this. It took quite a while though to manage to sort of figure out how to farm, but this is where the first sort of permanent settlements took off in Western Asia. The thing about Europe that I found really interesting was at one time, I didn't realize this, but at 20,000 BC, Great Britain was like an Arctic tundra, and the British Isles were joined to Europe because of the ice, all the water that was collected and stored in ice. There was a continuous land between Great Britain and Europe, the European continent. So the Great Britain was really kind of just the island was just really a peninsula of Europe. So I thought that was interesting because I really wasn't aware of that. And then the Arctic, the tundra extended all the way way down into England, and throughout most of continental Europe. It was really only like southern France and Spain and Portugal and maybe southern Italy that really escaped, the really Arctic conditions during the Ice Age. So I thought that was interesting. And then Americas, North and South America, the interesting thing about North America is there's still a lot of controversy about when the people migrated from Asia to North America, but this is another case where there was so much water bound up in ice that North America was joined to Siberia and Asia, and that's how people crossed. Although, they really had to cross some really rugged territory covered in ice. And the interesting thing is they made it all the way down to, the very, very tip of South America, Tierra del Fuego. And so, I just think that's so interesting that humans could, on foot with only stone tools and with this really harsh climate of the Ice Age going on, they really wound their way around the entire world for whatever reason, in a constant search for a better food or living conditions. Although, by the same token, when we went to Greater Australia and East Asia, one of the places we visited during that section was the far Arctic in Siberia, and people chose to actually live there and make a life there. So that was really a harsh climate, maybe compared to if they had gone further south down into Australia. Australia was joined with Tasmania at the time because of the lower sea level. I found the Aboriginal cultures of Australia to be very interesting because he talks about some of the 20th century ones, the current historical Aboriginal cultures that are known to history, as opposed to we sort of conjecture about how related they are to these in the distant past, but still, I found that really interesting. I didn't realize how diverse the Aboriginal cultures of Australia are or were. I think I thought of them as just one culture, and that's a mistake. It's just like the North American Native Americans of North America were, they were all different. So to lump them all together into one culture would really be an error. So, South Asia, that section, one of the cool things about that, I thought, was the development, ultimately, of the first great civilization in Mesopotamia and the development of writing that occurred there. The cultures in South Asia, really, I think they took their farming technology from that of Western Asia, but it spread. Farming technology and domestication of plants and animals occurred both with sharing between cultures and also popped up independently in China with rice, in Africa with a certain type of sheep, in Western Asia with sheep and goats and cattle. In South America, it was like the llamas and the quinoa, the grain, and corn and squash, and in Mexico, and beans in Mexico. So it was real interesting how in some places, they domesticated their own plants, that were native to their region, and in others, the technology spread. So, for example, rice ended up spreading all across Asia, not just in China, and corn, for example, from Mexico spread all up through North America as well as down through South America, as well as potatoes, which ultimately spread all the way around the world. Those started in South America. So, my thoughts. First of all, I want to shout out to the scientists and the academics who spend their entire lives studying this, remote past of humans and really making sense of it. And this book does a really great job of going into the detail of all the archaeology, the studies of pottery. People devote themselves to studying pollen, ancient pollen grains. There's a lot of information that's gleaned from that. So all the people who put that information together for the benefit of humankind, a big shout out and a big thank you to that. I'd also like to thank people like Steven Mithen, who then have the ability to go through all this information and condense it down into a readable format to the general public like me, so that I can also experience it. So thanks to everybody who works on this kind of knowledge, and then who works to disseminate it out to the general population. Another interesting thing that I think that I took away from this story was the way that it was written was actually, we have this fictional guide whose name is John Lubbock, and he is based on his namesake. There was an actual John Lubbock from the 19th century who wrote a book called Prehistoric Times in 1865. And so our traveler, John Lubbock, is traveling and carrying that book from the 19th century, and sometimes compares what was written in the 19th century about these ancient cultures and the development of, the hunters and gatherers into farming societies and cities, what was known back in the 19th century versus what we know today. But having this character, John Lubbock, time travel to all the continents, he actually sits in villages, he walks into villages. It really brought the past alive, and so it was a real engaging read to me. Granted, it was a lot to get through, but I never really got tired of it. It really kept my attention. And one thing that I really took away from it was how we used to have to be constantly on the move, because the focus was, of course, finding food, and that was a never-ending task. Either finding food or building the tools to gather food, or building the tools to kill animals to eat, to have food. So it was a constant struggle, I think, for survival. And then with this climate change, I didn't go into it a lot in this little chat, really can't do a book like this justice, but the constant climate change that they also were always having to adapt to, sometimes within a lifetime, sometimes within a generation, sometimes it took thousands of years. And when you're talking about a book like this, 1,000 years sort of seems like a decade sometimes, because we're talking about so much time has passed in that 20,000 to 5,000, that 15,000 year period that we're covering here. It would be difficult for us to even write a history of the last 1,000 years and condense it down to 500 pages, and this is 15,000 years of human history. So I enjoyed reading it. I'm really super glad that I finally got this read. I'm really glad I kept this book and got it read. I do love this kind of deep history in time, and I will have some more of these books coming up, sooner or later. So stay tuned. Take care. Bye.